let's go over a little history of music real quick. Now, if I don't go over some large portions of music history, you'll just have to excuse me for that. I'm trying to establish a baseline for using the major-minor system of tonality. This will gloss over a lot of important stuff, but this isn't really a course on music history, it's a course on music composition. So originally, music was relatively simple. If we go back to prehistoric music, we don't have a lot of information, but we generally think that the first instrument was the human voice. It has the capability of creating many different sounds, and so it was the natural choice for the musician in the family to choose. Now, there are some bone flutes that have been found, and probably some drums here or there, but I think it's safe to say that music was probably relatively simple and passed down orally from one person to the next. But as humans learned to build tools and created writing, we start to see evidence of ancient music. In fact, the oldest known song was written about 4,000 years ago in cuneiform. And you can hear it on YouTube. You just have to type the oldest melody, or the oldest known melody, circa 1400 BC. Now, we also start to see instruments like the lyre come into existence. Fast forward a few thousand years to the medieval period, and we start to see Gregorian chant. Now, Gregorian chant was a form of single-line singing that followed modes. And modes are kind of like scales, but a little bit different. The easiest way to remember modes is that they cover the white notes on the piano. For instance, the Dorian mode goes from D to D and has a minor type sound. So Dorian sounds like this. The other modes are also found starting on different notes, moving up the white keys. They are Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, Now let me just say something here real quick about Locrian. It wasn't really commonly used, and there's one major reason, and that has to do with this interval, which is known as a diminished fifth or an augmented fourth. But we won't really get too much into detail about that right now. And then finally, the last one is the Ionian. Now there are also plagal versions of these modes that drop the starting note down a fourth, but have the original note as the key note or the tonic. I won't go into too much detail here about that because it's not really that important for now. It will be covered in a future course about counterpoint. So after this, around 800 AD or so, composers started adding a second line to their music, and this was called organum. Now, this example, of course, of organum is a little bit later. It comes from around 1199 AD, and it is from a composer named Perotine. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that's what it looks like. So, from here, composers started to experiment with different intervals, eventually leading to a complex system of composition called counterpoint. Now, counterpoint sounds very harmonious to our ears, but the reality is there was not a standardized harmonic system yet in place. It was, in fact, a way of bringing together multiple melodic lines with what were deemed consonant intervals. But there was nothing saying that you had to move from a C chord to a G chord, or, back to a C, or a D minor chord to a G chord to a C. Nothing like that. Now, don't worry if counterpoint doesn't quite make sense yet, because in this course you don't really need to learn counterpoint. But I do highly recommend learning it at some point, and as I said earlier, I will be creating a course on counterpoint for the Academy. Just stay tuned and I'll let you know when it's out. Now, there were some theorists back in the day that tried to figure out a system of harmony, but it wasn't till Jean-Philippe Rameau, and once again, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, in 1722 wrote his famous treatise on harmony. And that's when people really began to subscribe to this way of thinking about vertically what harmony was. And it's at this point we basically get the major-minor system of tonality.